Good morning, my creative friends. Today we're going to get started on our third project for the 12 months of wholeness through creativity. And I think the project this month is very fitting for the time and season that we are in. Months ago, I planned to do that for this month and obviously had no idea what would be coming and how much encouragement would be needed right now during this time. But what we're going to make this month is an encouragement card, so it will help you to stay calm in the midst of some of this turmoil through the creativeness and working on the project and creating something. It will also encourage someone else that you send it to as they go through this time. And the added benefit is always with creativity, it's going to give you something to do that's going to help heal and calm your emotions, as well as giving your brain and your body something to do. And as we all might start going a little stir crazy with the social distancing they're asking for right now, or for some of you may even be required right now, I think this will be a great project to work on. Our cards can be as simple or elaborate as we desire. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different techniques and ways to make cards. We're going to cover just a few of them. I'm going to show you some very simple things that you can do with no added tools, as well as a little bit more involved projects. And I hope to post a lot of pictures of a lot of different designs we can do. As always, there's always more in-depth classes and techniques that I can teach you, and I'm happy to do so. So let's get started taking a look at some of the different ways that cards can be done, and then we'll get started with the basics in this video, and I'll probably break for our more elaborate card into a separate video. But a card can be as simple as having a card background. This one I stamped on the background and inked on the background a bit, but all of the other designs onto the card are from pre-bought ephemera packs. It's just a collage of different things in a pack that I had, except for I stamped the happy birthday on the tag that was part of the ephemera. Another way that you could do it is just a lot of layering of simple shapes. You can just use squares and rectangles that you can cut with your trimmer, or you can use dies or punches to make other simple shapes such as the circles. So I was talking about these two cards. So here's a couple of cards that have just basic shapes on them. We've got some layering of rectangles. This one does, both of them do have a couple of circle punch outs that you could use. This one has a stamped sentiment. This one has no sentiment at all on the outside, just the rectangle layers. This one goes a little bit further in that it has a punch out and also some die cuts with designs, as well as a pre-made ephemera, and also some ribbon and some embossing on it. So very simple ways. This one is the one that we're going to be making that's a little bit more elaborate. It's a spinner card, so we can spin this. And close the card. So when it comes out of the envelope, it'll be like that. And when you open it, it spins around. So this one uses die cuts for the shapes of it. But there's several different things we can do, and we'll just get into some of that later. For right now, I want to start in finishing up this video just by showing you the basics. The first thing that you're going to need is a card base. and that's just the part of your card that opens. Generally, we stamp a sentiment inside. You can write your own greeting inside on top of that. You might want to do some other stamping or a little bit of decoration, but normally inside we don't do a whole lot. But the outside is where we use a lot of our layerings. Our card bases are generally either white or a neutral color, just so that it's easy to stamp on and read on the inside. But you could even use black or brighter colors if you put a white mat on the inside. Most of the cards also that I make are called A2 cards, which are 5.5 by 4.25. And that means that they're exactly a half size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. So you're going to get 2 A2 cards out of every regular paper size cardstock. You could also do 6 by 6 cards out of the 12 by 12 cardstock. That would be more of your scrapbooking size. Just cutting that in half, folding it in half is going to give you 2 6 by 6 cards. You can get 1 5 by 7 out of an 8.5 by 11 by cutting 1 inch off the side, making it 10 inches, and then cutting 1.5 inches off the bottom, making it 7 inches. So then you've got 7 by 10 folded in half, makes 5 by 7. So anyhow, with our regular cardstock, what we're going to do first is just cut it in half. And so we're going to cut it at 5.5 across the short side. The other way we can do them is to cut them the long ways. This is going to make a side folding card if it goes this way, or a top folding card if you put it in the landscape mode. To have a top folding portrait card, you're not going to be able to use the small guillotine trimmer that we have here. So you're going to need a trimmer that will accommodate your full 11 inches. So here we're going to use this one, and we're going to put it at the 4.25 inch. And trim it that way. So the cardstock that you want to use for your bases, you want it to be a good heavy cardstock. I know a lot of card makers use some really expensive cardstock. I do not. It only needs to be a base. You're going to put other things on top of it. If you're doing techniques and things, you're usually doing them on a different type of paper that you're going to layer on top of this. So I find that for a card base, you just need something that's a little thicker. I find that this inexpensive 110 weight, that's almost 200 GSM, works really well. A lot of your cardstock is going to be a little thinner. It's going to be 65 pounds. You can use that. It's going to make a thinner card. You don't want to put a whole lot of weight on it, but it does work, and you can get it in the different neutral colors that work well too. And in addition to white, the cream is probably what I use the most, and then occasionally some of the tan or craft colored or gray ones. So that's what we're going to start with. So you've got your card bases cut, and then you're going to score them in half so that they fold. So your 11-inch ones, you're going to score at 5.5 inches. and your 8.5-inch ones, you're going to score at 4 1/4. Now another way that you could score this is to make a gatefold card, in which case you're going to fold the two sides in. To do that, you're going to score at 2 1/8, flip it around and score at 2 1/8. Fold your scores over and burnish to keep them solid in this. That'll make a gatefold card, which is another way. We're not going to make a gatefold card this time, but this is one way you can fold, and I will show you an example of one that's done that way. Said after scoring in half, just burnish them so that they lay nice and flat. And you've got, like I said, your side fold if your card is going in portrait style, or if you've got it in landscape style, it's at the top. This is total personal preference, which way you prefer for your cards to open, and sometimes your card design will make a difference. On one of the cards that I'm going to do today, we'll see that it's going to make a difference whether it folds on the top or on the side. So again, if you'd use the ones that you've cut lengthwise, then the fold's going to be on the side for landscape or the top for portrait. There's a few more card bases for me to work with. The next thing I want to show you is some different layouts. As I said, cards can be very elaborate, and there's a lot of fancy ways you can make them, but we're going to start with very simple. You may not even have any punches or anything to make different cutouts, so I wanted to show you that you can make some pretty cards even with just squares and rectangles that you can cut with your paper trimmer or even with just scissors. You can find a lot of different card layouts online. A lot of different companies have them at their websites. These are just a few that I took off of my Pinterest board for card layouts. And as you can tell, all of these have nothing but squares or rectangles used to make many different designs. This one has fishtailed the ends of the rectangles, as this one did. This one rounded the corners of one of the rectangles. Some of them have some little dot embellishments, some of them have ribbon, but basically these cards use nothing but squares and rectangles. And here's a few of them that I have made that use nothing but squares and rectangles. Very simple. You'll see that this one is a gatefold style. The bottom two I did use punches from, but they're still a basic rectangle. Also in these, you'll notice that a nicer look can usually be achieved if you add a solid mat behind things. Sometimes it's not needed depending on what your pattern papers are, but sometimes it just adds a little extra niceness to it to do that. So we are going to start by making a very simple card of just basic shapes, squares and rectangles. And I've already cut these shapes out to make this go really quick for this first video here, and then like I said, we'll do another video where we will use die cutting and some other things to make a little bit fancier card. This one I am going to put as a top fold landscape card because of one of the things I'm going to do. I'm going to want that fold at the top. So let's start with this. Okay, when you mat and layer your papers, and again, you could just put designs on, you know, just your individual squares and things on the plain paper here, but normally it looks a little nicer if you mat and use layers. And so you're going to see several layers in this card. You could cut your mat the exact same size as this if you want no white to show. Generally though, your first mat is going to be 4 by 5 1/4. That's going to leave an 1/8 inch border all the way around your design here. So we're going to use the black polka dot for our border there. Next we're going to use several squares. As you can tell, I've already glued a couple of them on just so we didn't have the time that it would take for me to get those all lined up. But for this one, I cut my first large square at 2.5 inches square and put it on the diagonal. The next layer is going to be a mat that is 2 3/8 inches square. That's going to leave just a 1/16 of an inch all the way around. I didn't want a whole lot of that gold showing, and because I've got the little tiny squares here, which are 1 1/4 inch square, for this pattern, for the flowers to show it all, I couldn't make my small squares much smaller than I did, so they are 1 1/8 inch for the small squares there. So let's start by putting those on. As I've talked about in previous videos, there's all different kinds of adhesive that you can use for making things. I prefer not to use liquid adhesive when I'm making paper and cardstock things, just because it can warp the paper easily. There's some places where it is needed, but generally I like using a tape runner, and you can use the small ones that you can buy, but it's much more economical if you're going to make a lot of cards to have something like this advanced tape glider called ATG, and it just rolls a line of double-sided tape along your pieces here. We're going to put that around all 4 sides. For this larger one, I'm going to put one more line across the middle there, and I'm just going to try to center this the best that I can on here, leaving same size of border all the way around. I'm going to do the same thing with the small. Hopefully I'm still in the video frame here. Move this up a bit just in case. Okay, we've got the other 2 small squares. And if you haven't noticed yet, this is based off of one of those card designs, layouts that I showed you. Depending on your paper, the design can change greatly. What you see that somebody else has made, or in a layout, your finished card may look totally different depending on what colors and types of paper you've used. Shapes, if you're using punches or die cuts, the shape of something could be the same layout but the shape could make it look entirely different. And of course, your sentiment that you put on it is going to change, whether it's a happy birthday card or a get well or deepest sympathy. All those things are going to make your cards look very different. Alrighty, we've got our basic pattern put together here. For our card, I wanted to pull in another layer of plain black just to really emphasize my sentiment here. Obviously the sentiment you want to put on something that it's going to show up on well, so I decided to bring the white back in. And for this one, I didn't just stamp it with ink, but I also heat embossed it. So I will show you how to do that in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this one together, and then we'll get another piece out that I'll show you how to heat emboss your stamps. And that just gives it that nice gilded, looks like a gold foil type writing, just to make it a little extra special. Also with this one, just to add to those edges, I took a gold marker and just went around the edges just to give that nice gold edging. Notice I messed up a bit there, but that doesn't matter. These are homemade cards. They are not perfection. Being creative isn't about being perfect. Being creative is about the process of making something and the joy of giving and receiving something that someone has put their own time and effort and love and creativity in. So I'm not popping anything up with dimensional tape on this because we do have 5 full layers here where the sentiment goes. So that's going to be all we put on that. Whoops. So again, with a big mat here, and my tape is messing up. There we go. I go around all 4 sides, fairly close to the edge, and then do one down the center. And then again, we're going to have that 1/8 of an inch around each side. Just try to line it up the best that you can. Another thing that I considered doing with this one, we'll see if we like the look or not, but another thing you can do is add some kind of ribbon or twine to your card if you want to add. We could put this around and tie it into a bow or a knot here. I don't know that I like it, and my golds don't really match, but it's a possibility that you can try. You saw that one of my cards and others that I already had done had ribbon on it, but that's one possibility. You can wrap it around once, twice, 3 times, however much you want, but you can decide whether you like something like that added or not. Another thing that you could do would be to add some type of bling or glitz to it. There's pearls that could be added, different sizes that would emphasize our polka dot, our white polka dots there. Other types of rhinestones. This one probably has something that's kind of goldish that would bring out the gold that we could put on here. So I'll wait and decide what I want to do on that one later. Probably show you a picture of it when I get it finished. But the other thing, sometimes you have little tiny scraps left that are just small. These can be a nice way to do the inside of your card, if you don't sit here and make a big mess with the glue strip. And if you've got a really thin strip, this might be a time when you want to use your liquid glue just to get it on there. This one is wide enough that I can use my tape runner if I can get it to work properly today. If it overhangs the sides a little bit, just twist it over to get it all behind, and just put it along the edge there. So you've got just a little bit of decoration in there besides your stamping. Okay, we're going to finish this card up now. And I'm going to start by showing you 3 different ways that you can do stamping. The first way is very simple. You've got a clear stamp. This one's a really small one. And you put it on a stamp block, which is also clear, so you can see through it. Open up our card here. And you just tap the stamp into your ink to ink it up, and then line it up where you want it. Push down, hold it there for a little bit for the ink to transfer, and lift it up, and you've got your stamped sentiment on there. The second way is if you would happen to have a wood stamp instead. And the thing with these is that you don't always know exactly where they're going to stamp, and so it's best to do them with a stamp positioning tool. This one's called a Stamp-A-Majig. It's got a little clear piece of plastic and then a little L corner there. So for this one, you put your stamp in your ink the same. You put your clear piece right up in the corner and make sure it's right up, and then you put your stamp right up in the corner and push it down, and there you have your stamped sentiment on your clear piece. Now you can line it up just where you want it on your paper. Put your little L corner right on the corner there. Remove your plastic piece. Stamp up your stamp again. Put it right in the corner. Straight down. And you've got it exactly where you want it positioned. The third way is what I put on our card already, and as I told you before, it's called heat embossing. And we're going to do that with a different type of stamp positioner. This one is the Tim Holtz stamp positioner. There's also one called a Misty. I really like this one, but what you do is your stamp is placed on your little clear grid here, and your paper is placed here. These are really strong magnets. Don't let them touch each other or they can shatter. But you put that there. I've already positioned this where I want it. I felt this was going to be the best way to do that because I'm stamping at an angle onto a square that I'm putting on the diagonal. So I stamped using this. But the other thing, instead of using regular ink, which archival ink that this is one of my favorites for stamping sentiments and things, because it is a very crisp and a permanent and waterproof ink, so it's great for doing sentiments. But for this, I want to do something a little bit different, because we're going to do the heat embossing. And so we're going to use a different ink. It's called Versamark Watermark Stamp Ink. It's made for watermarks and embossing. It's a very sticky, clear ink. And so we're going to put that on there. Because we're going to be using embossing powder, I'm also going to cover my paper really good with an embossing buddy bag. It's got a white powder in there, kind of like a cornstarch or something, and it's going to help keep the embossing powder from sticking anywhere that I don't want it to, that it'll just stick to the ink. So I've inked that up. I'm going to press on here. The great thing about a stamp positioning tool like this is if you were using a more detailed stamp or a newer stamp that maybe is not as working as well, you can re-ink it. Maybe you missed a spot. You can see that it's not as solid as you want. You can re-ink it, and it's going to put it in exactly the same place that it was before. So you can re-stamp over and over in the same place. Okay, I'm going to pick this up with my tweezers just so I don't get any oils from my hands on my paper here. Move my stamp positioner out of the way, and then I'm going to get a piece of scratch paper to pour my embossing powder over. So this is a detailed embossing powder that's good for fine lines and stuff. This one's by Ranger. I really like Ranger's embossing powders. There are many other ones available too, though, but we're going to pour that over and dump the extra out. And there we have the powder stuck on there. Now that can still be very easily wiped off, so we need to heat set it. And what's going to happen is this powder is actually going to melt, and it's going to provide that embossed powder. So just put the rest of my powder back in. It takes very, very little. A little tub like this will last you a really long time. And so to heat this up and to melt it into the paper, you need a heat tool. This may look like a blow dryer. It's much hotter than a blow dryer, and it's also more directed and not as much air as a blow dryer. It is going to be noisy. So once the heat tool heats up, you just move it over your paper. If it starts to warp at all, you can do it from behind, or to not have your embossing powder blow around. You can see the color is changing as that powder melts, even from behind. So, very quick. All right. So you can see the powder melted on there. It changed colors. It's now very smooth. You don't have that glitter texture to it. You just have the nice embossed gold on there. It takes just a couple seconds for it to dry. Don't touch it right away because it still could be wet and you could smear it. But it really adds an extra special touch by using the embossing. As I already told you on the one that I'd put on, I used the gold pen and just edged to give a little bit of gold on the edge to finish my little sticker out. Okay, the last thing we're going to do for this card, we talked about possibly putting on some rhinestones, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So generally when you add little embellishments like this, you want to work in odd numbers. So 3 is a good number. Sometimes if you want more, it could be 5. We're going to use my little craft pick here, which works great for picking these little embellishments up. They do already have adhesive on the back of them, but to get them lined up exactly where I want them, I'm going to use this to help place them right where I want them to be. Again, that little bit of adhesive's coming over the side, so I want to tuck that underneath as much as possible. And there we go. 3 little rhinestones just to finish off the front, and our little sentiment inside to finish off the inside. So now that we've done all of those things, you've learned a lot of things that you can do with very few supplies that still makes a really nice looking card. As I said, this card is very simple, requires very few supplies, but yet it's really nice and it can be a great encouragement to others. I will be back in the next video making our little bit more elaborate card that takes on a little bit more, just to show you what can still be done pretty simply, but just uses a few more supplies and just some different ways that you can go. So, my dear friends, gather your supplies, whatever you've got, whatever you want to get, and get started working on your encouragement cards today. And just have a great day and be creative. Love y'all. Bye.